You can go ahead and take it away.
Hi, thanks. Welcome to the final day of the SUNY Online Summit 2026. Today is Academic Technologies Day, so as we're saying, Friday is where it's at. I want to introduce our speaker here today. Tom Richman is an education specialist and policy analyst and host of the Inside Your Ed podcast. And if I had any talent at faking accents, I would have said that in the British accent, which covers the main education news and developments in England. After starting his career as a school teacher, he spent almost a decade working in policy development and research. And this included work in two think tanks and advising two secretaries of state at the Department of Education in London. After leaving the department, he went back to teaching before returning to politics in 2018. And from 2019 to 2024, he was the director of EDSK, a think tank that designs solutions to policy problems across the English education system. In September 2025, he published a major think tank report called Education. Could generative artificial intelligence pose a risk to educational standards today? And that's what he's joining us to talk about today. So welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation to come along today. So, yeah, a nice lively title. I hope to get your Friday session started today. Will AI make you stupid? So, what I'm going to do is try and cover quite a lot of different things in my presentation today. I'm going to talk about some theoretical reasons why I'm worried about artificial intelligence in education. I'm going to talk about some practical issues, talk about lots and lots of research evidence, and of course, talk about some solutions to what I would be doing about artificial intelligence in education. So I thought, given all of that, the best place to start my presentation today was to talk about taxi drivers. So, the famous London black cab. You guys in New York have got your famous yellow cabs. I know, but we've got our famous London black cabs. I don't know if you ever really thought about becoming a taxi driver, but I've always had the sense that people are sort of not hugely keen on the idea. It sort of comes across as a bit of a low skill job. You don't really need many qualifications to do it. Quite a repetitive job. I think there are two reasons to sort of slightly push back on that kind of mindset when it comes to being a taxi driver in London. First and foremost, you can earn a pretty decent salary. An experienced taxi driver in London can earn about 55, 60,000 pounds a year, so about 75, $80,000, which is not a shabby salary in this day and age. But the second reason I'd be skeptical about looking at taxi drivers as being a low skill job, at least in London, is the fact that it is extraordinarily difficult to become a taxi driver. Not a lot of people know this, but it is extraordinarily difficult. And the reason it's so difficult is because you have to pass a test to become a taxi driver in London. And that test is called The Knowledge. It's a great title, literally called The Knowledge. And in order to pass that, what you have to do is you have to memorize a whole bunch of street names in London. So they take Charing Cross Station in London, which is, if you look at it on a map, is pretty much smack bang in the middle of London, Charing Cross Station. And they draw a 6-mile radius around Charing Cross. And you have to learn all the street names within 6 miles of Charing Cross Station. That's what the knowledge tests you on. But there is one problem. Within 6 miles of Charing Cross Station, there are 25,000 street names. And you have to learn all of them off by heart. Now, to give you a sense of that, if I wrote on a Microsoft Word document on one line, every line I wrote a different street name and just kept going for 25,000 street names, that would be 500 sheets of paper it would take me to write down 25,000 street names. I have to learn all of them. And it gets worse than that, because not only do you have to learn 25,000 street names to be a black cab driver in London, you have to learn 20,000 points of interest as well. Hospitals, railway stations, pubs, hotels, registry offices of people who want to get married. You have to learn all of those too. So the question is, how on earth do you do that? How do you learn 25,000 street names and 20,000 points of interest to become a taxi driver? So what people do is they get given a book, and it's got 320 routes in it across London that covers off all these different streets. So sort of one route goes there to there, and then one route goes there to there, and one route goes down there. 320 routes. And what people do is they get on a bicycle or a scooter or a moped, and they get a map, and they literally just drive these routes all the time, and they try and memorize how all the different bits fit together. So, okay, so at that junction, right, I've got that pub, and that pub is opposite that hotel at that junction. If you turn left, then you get to that railway station, and they keep going. It takes typically about 3 years to pass the test. That's how long it takes to learn 25,000 street names and 20,000 points of interest. But even then, 2/3 of people who start learning the knowledge never complete it. It's that difficult to do. And the reason I mention all of that is not just because I think it's a really fun story, but because I think it's an absolutely beautiful example of what we call the science of learning. When we talk about learning, I don't think it was that long ago that people used to talk about learning as kind of a bit of a mystical process. Oh, well, some people learn things and some people don't. But the truth is that we've talked more and more, certainly in the UK system, in the school system, and a bit less so at universities, but certainly in schools, we talk about this as a science, that over the course of 30, 40 years, through psychology, through neuroscience, through education research, we've built a pretty good understanding of how people learn. And just a really simple demonstration, it's just this little diagram which I'll talk you through, which I think just captures the essence, the real essence of the science of learning. Something happens in your environment. You read something or you hear something, and that information goes into your working memory, the processing bit of your memory system. If you then process that information, you can then move it into your long-term memory, which is essentially learning. Learning is often defined as a change in your long-term memory. And then once you've got it in a long-term memory, well, you can pull it back out again if you need it. You can bring it back into your working memory and then think about it again. But of course, if you don't use that information or don't process it, that information can slip away and be forgotten. And that's a really nice, simple way of thinking about the science of learning. But even more simply than that, a couple of brilliant professors, Professor Dan Willingham, who's based at University of Virginia, I think, and Professor Rob Coe, who's here in the UK. They've just got these beautiful quotes that capture even more succinctly than a diagram what learning is. Dan Willingham says, memory is the residue of thought. This is such a wonderful phrase. Memory is the residue of thoughts. And Rob Coe says, learning happens when people have to think hard. And those taxi drivers have to think really, really hard, trying to learn 25,000 street names and 20,000 points of interest over the course of 3 years. The only way to do that is to think incredibly hard. So with that in mind, what does that mean when we think about generative artificial intelligence, things like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc.? What's that got to do with the learning process? And to understand that, we need to talk about cognitive offloading. So this is the idea that we can, I think about this as sort of mental outsourcing is a nice way to sort of define this. That I use a physical action. When I've got something I want to remember, I use a physical action to reduce how demanding it is to remember that information. And a really simple example I give of this all the time is just when you're on the phone and someone says, oh, here's my phone number. Well, what do? You just try and pick up a pen and you write down the phone number. That is a perfect example of you trying to reduce the demands of remembering something by passing responsibility of learning it onto something else. In that case, a piece of paper. You could use a digital device, doesn't matter. But the point is, you're not trying to form a new memory. You're outsourcing the problem of remembering something onto the piece of paper. So you don't even try and form a new memory. You offload the problem onto something else. So back in July 2022, so just before, a few months before ChatGPT was even released, a really good review in the journal Frontiers in Artificial Intelligence was published, which has brought together everything we know about cognitive offloading. It's not in any way a new idea. This has been around since as long as pen and paper has been around. On the plus side, cognitive offloading can be really helpful. If you want to reduce the chance of you making an error when you're trying to remember someone's phone number, if you just try and keep it in your head when you're on the phone, you almost certainly make an error when you try and remember it later. It's a great idea to write it down because it means you're going to be accurate with that phone number later on. That's the good news. The bad news is that what we know from memory research is that can mean that information is very quickly forgotten. Your friend might have read out their phone number, but sort of in one ear, straight out the other ear because you've written it down. You don't try and form any mental representations of it at all. Cognitive offloading can also harm your metacognition. Your understanding and your ability to regulate your own learning can be hindered if you keep offloading things. We know that offloading increases when you perceive something to be more complicated. You're more likely to reach for offloading if you can, when it looks a bit scary. And we also know that offloading is more likely when your working memory capacity is lower. So for younger children, for example, who do have smaller working memories. And also, even if you believe you're worse at something that makes you more likely to engage in cognitive offloading. So all of this was known before generative AI turned up on everyone's doorstep. And that's why, as Jamie kindly mentioned, I published a paper at the start of this academic year, because the UK government was saying to schools, I think you really should start looking at this generative AI stuff. And I was like, whoa, shouldn't we just check first before we start charging towards this stuff that we know it's going to have good effects rather than bad effects, right? Social Market Foundation is really smart, centrist think tank. They very kindly gave me a platform to talk about this stuff. And I thought, right, if the government's not going to look at what impact generative AI has on learning, I'm going to go and have a look at it. And I tried to find all the research that I could. And it is true that there is lots of research out there saying generative AI can make you faster, it can make you more productive, more efficient. But that's a very different question from whether you learn stuff. So what I'm going to talk you through now is some of the, not all the studies, I haven't got time to do all of them. I picked out some of the main studies that I think are worth thinking about when we think about learning. Let's start with the most famous study that's probably been conducted so far. A lot of you may have come across it already. The very famous MIT brain scan study they did to look at what impact ChatGPT has on us. So an essay writing task. They decided to split participants into three groups. Firstly, students could write an essay using a large language model to help them, LLM, of which ChatGPT is an example. Another group could use a search engine, but not an LLM, to help them write their essay. And a third group, affectionately called brain only, the clues in the title, they could just use their brains. No external support available, just use their brains to write the essay. And what they found through these brain scans was that as the amount of external support you received increased while writing the essay, the amount of connectivity, the amount of lighting up in your brain went down. The least activity in their brains was detected by the people who got the most support from the LLM. And this higher level of neural activity in the brain-only group, they showed the most activity in their brains. That was associated with them forming stronger memories and indeed being more accurate when they were writing their essay. But the crucial point is, the people in the brain-only group were under greater strain. It was harder for them. But we know that learning happens when you think hard. And those people, even though they felt the cognitive, the thinking strain more, that led to them learning more. And the funniest bit of this study was that when they tested the students afterwards about the essay they had written, the students had used a large language model. Not a single one of them could quote their own essay. Just think about that for a moment. Students wrote an essay with an LLM. Not a single one of them could quote their own essay. Even by the third test session, only 1/3 of them could quote their own essay, way below the other two groups. And what the authors concluded, I think quite rightly, was that yes, using an LLM reduces the cognitive load, the cognitive strain, but that shifts you from actively critical thinking about something to passively overseeing it. So rather than doing the hard thinking, you just focus on verifying or modifying what the AI says. And that is a huge change from a learning and memory formation perspective, and not in a good direction. Here's another study, again, a very unsubtle title for this paper. Generative AI can harm learning, another really famous study that's come out on this topic. This time an RCT, very different study, take 1,000 students who are learning mathematics, split them into three groups. One group gets access to a chatbot a bit like ChatGPT. Another group gets access to a chatbot that's kind of an improved version of ChatGPT that can give you prompts a bit like saying, oh, the correct answer is one of these three answers, or something like that. So it's giving you a bit of a nudge beyond a normal chatbot. And then the third group were a control group. They got no support from a chatbot. Compared to the control group, the students who used a large language model, a chatbot, to solve their practice maths problems massively outperformed the control group. The ChatGPT group, 48% better at solving practice problems in class. The students who had the even better, the improved version of ChatGPT, 127% better at solving problems in class. Now, if I offered that to most educators, they'd probably bite my hand off in terms of performance improvement. But performance is not the same as learning. When all the students lost access to their chatbots in the final exam, the students who had access to the chatbot when solving the practice problems performed even worse than the students who'd never had access to a chatbot at all. Even the students who had the improved version of ChatGPT while practicing, their performance in the final exam was exactly the same as the students who'd never even touched the chatbot. And the beautiful conclusion they came to was that students were using it as a crutch. They were leaning on the chatbot to do their thinking for them. It reduces their cognitive load, but thinking hard is what drives learning. And the students weren't thinking hard anymore. And that's why they performed worse. Here's another study. This time, can we delegate learning to automation? This time comparing LLM chatbots, search engines, and books. Pretty useful comparison in the context of university education. So give students either books or the internet or ChatGPT on some really tough university level material this time. So taking it beyond high school students. And what they found that using the LLM didn't stop you from understanding things necessarily. But when it came to long-term memory retention, it was less effective than just reading the books. And here's what really worried me about the study. So they split them into higher competence. This is high GPA students and lower competence, low GPA students. What they found was that the higher competence students who came into the study with those higher grades, they spent much more time using the LLM to revisit and rethink their work. Whereas the lower GPA students just focus on scanning and cutting and pasting whatever the LLM said. No one told them to do this. This was spontaneously how the students responded to the task they had. Because the lower GPA students were focusing on just getting the job done. Yes, that decreases the cognitive load on them, just copying and pasting. That's not difficult to do. I don't have to think about that. But the problem is we need that cognitive load for learning, for you really to form those schema, those packets of knowledge, as we call them, in your long-term memory. Here's a very different study based from Switzerland, AI Tools in Society by Michael Gerlich. He did surveys and interviews this time. So again, a very different experimental style. 666 participants, whole range of different ages, from teenagers right up to those, I think, in their 50s and 60s, to ask them about their use. And he found a significant negative correlation between the amount that people were using AI tools and their critical thinking abilities, which was being driven, unsurprisingly, by cognitive offloading. But the people knew what was happening. If you've used these tools, you know it. You know deep down what's going on. These participants were saying, "Yeah, I know that it might be diminishing my ability to do this job properly and to work independently," but they did it anyway. Worryingly, the youngest participants were the most likely to become dependent on these tools and to lower their own critical thinking skills. And again, they can feel it when they're doing it. They're not unaware of these problems. They know that they're just less likely to engage in this serious critical thinking that we desperately need them to do. The participants even reported, "Yeah, I don't really think critically about the stuff. I just do what the AI suggests." And again, totally spontaneous. No one told them to do this, but this is how the younger learners and those with lower educational attainment responded. But when we think about the science of learning, the instinct is to talk about, young people, children, think about people being educated. But I think we should talk about educators too, because the science of learning is about you and I just as much as it is about children and young people. And if you think about what this means, if we get generative AI to do our work for us, be it creating a lecture plan, a seminar, or a resource for the students, every time we do that, an opportunity to learn has been lost. And what we know from cognitive science is that if you don't form those initial memories, that means the next time you try and do something, you don't have that earlier memory to fall back on because you never formed it in the first place, which means it's going to be harder for you the next time. And it compounds itself. You're just not building up that knowledge and understanding. And we know that expertise is absolutely vital for delivering a great education, really high quality teaching. But if you just don't develop it, it's not going to develop by itself. At this point, it might be worth drawing a distinction between someone who's been, lecturing for 30, 40 years on a topic. If someone with 30 years experience, says, "You know what, I've got a lecture tomorrow, I'm just going to use ChatGPT to help me just pull up some slides," that's probably very different from the science of learning perspective compared to someone who is inexperienced, who's doing things for the first time, who doesn't have that knowledge and expertise, that they will miss out on an opportunity to learn and acquire that expertise, and nobody else can help them do it. They just can't. So let's talk about knowledge workers now. So this is a study done, impact of generative AI on critical thinking. This, Carnegie Mellon and Microsoft did this study, where they surveyed knowledge workers about real world examples. Let's get out of the laboratory, real world examples of people using generative AI at work, whole range of different professions. And it's the same message. It's not just about younger kids, it's about all of us. Yes, it can make you more efficient and faster, but that inhibits your critical thinking and means you become over-reliant on a tool and your diminished ability to solve problems for yourself. And what they also found was that the more confident people were in generative AI, the more damaging its effects were. So the more you believe AI can do great things, that means you think even less, which means you learn even less, which means you develop even less expertise. So well done to the skeptics out there. You're probably protecting yourselves from some of the worst effects of this stuff. The people who buy into the hype are more vulnerable to its problems. Here's a very different study to think about. Let's leave the impact on learning to one side just for a moment and talk about the social dynamics of using AI, which I hadn't really thought about before I started writing my paper, but I thought this is a really interesting study just from April last year, where they did a whole range of different experiments to test people's social dynamics when they're using AI. And what they found was that in these experiments where some people had access to AI and some people didn't, the people who were getting help from AI were worried. They were actually worried that people would perceive them to be lazier, less competent, and less diligent than people who were not using AI. They were actually just worried that that's how people would perceive them. And that's good for them, because actually when they recorded what people thought, observers seeing somebody else using AI did rate them as lazier, less competent, and less diligent. If you're sitting in a room of fellow academics and one person is getting AI to do all their lecture planning and one person's doing it by themselves, is it really not going to have any effect on you? It really made me think, this study, and I haven't stopped thinking about it ever since, to be honest. So it's a wonderful paradox here. A tool can make you more productive at the same time as eroding what other people think about you. Or, as the author said, it can simultaneously improve your performance and damage your professional reputation at the same time. Have we really thought about that enough as an education community, or indeed any other profession too? And this another study, how AI impacts skill formation, came out just a few weeks ago, but I thought it was worth throwing to the mix. This wasn't in my paper, but a study by Judy Shen and Alex Tamkin. They looked at people learning how to code, set up lots of really interesting experiments. I've just highlighted a couple of bits from the abstract in yellow. Novice workers who rely heavily on AI to complete unfamiliar tasks may compromise their own skill acquisition in the process. AI use impairs conceptual understanding, code reading, debugging skills without delivering significant efficiency gains. Participants who fully delegated their tasks showed some productivity improvements, but at the cost of learning. So they did a faster job, but it also made them stupid. Now you might look at a study and go, it's the anti-AI lobby again. Here we go. This study was produced by Anthropic, the makers of Claude, one of the most powerful AI tools in the world right now. These companies can't keep this stuff hidden forever. Okay, from learning to assessments. When we think about the impact of generative AI, I think about assessment a lot. And the reason I think about it is because I see stories like this from the US, which was, I'm sure some of you may well have seen this, over in Northeastern. A student filed a formal complaint and demanded her money back from Northeastern because she caught her professor using ChatGPT to mark their work, and she was not very happy about it. I think I'm correct in saying that Northeastern rejected her complaint, presumably because they hadn't said they weren't going to use ChatGPT. I don't know how it ended up. And some people, I was seeing some commentary around this, which is really interesting. People talking about transparency. So the solution to this problem is to be transparent with students, and that gets around this problem of students then complaining. I'm not so sure. So here's a study that was published in EdWeek. Again, it's a school-based study, but it's the best sort of data I could find that really got me into this issue. So they surveyed a whole load of teachers and school leaders about this particular issue. So what they asked them was that In your view, should teachers tell students and or parents if they've used AI for the following purposes? So the options were, yes, you should tell students, but not parents. Second, you should tell parents you've used AI, but not students. Or you should tell both students and parents you've used AI. Or finally, it's not necessary to tell either students or parents you've used AI. And they gave them a whole range of different scenarios of when AI could be used in the education journey. So one of the ones they asked me about was about assessments. So you're creating an end of topic test for a student, and you use AI to do that test. You can see 74% of respondents said you do not have to tell students or parents you've used AI in that scenario. Interestingly, 19%, 1 in 5, said you should tell students and parents, but the vast majority said no, you do not have to tell students and parents you've used AI if you create an assessment for those students. When it came to creating assignments, things like, I don't know, take-home essays or whatever it is, again, overwhelming majority said no, you do not have to tell students or parents you're using AI. 1 in 6 sort of said you should tell students and parents, most said no. But when it came to grading, look at what happened. If I asked all the people on this lovely call today, what do you think the answer is? I'd probably get about a 50-50 split. Half of you would say, yeah, you need to tell students or parents you're grading students' work with AI. And the other half would say, no, you don't. That is a huge problem. That is a huge problem for the education community. We simply do not agree with each other on the need for transparency when we are using AI. And that to me is a massive problem. And I think that off the back of that, I think we then get into some really difficult situations. This may well have happened. I'd love to hear in the Q&A at the end whether this is anyone's come across these situations, but we're starting to maybe see some of this bubbling up. So the first one we've got to think about is student complaints, just like we saw at Northeastern. What if a student turns around and says, I don't care what AI says about my work. AI just makes things up. I want you to mark it because you're the expert. What is the right response in that situation? I'd find it very hard to say, I'm not going to, or I don't want to. What is the correct response in that situation? If a parent's chipping into their child's education, which they might well be, I don't think it's inconceivable we're going to have parents turn around and saying, hold on a second, we've paid you that money. It's your job to mark that student's work. Why are you not doing your job? What is the correct response in that situation? And the one that's really got me thinking recently is about what it does to the educator-student relationship. How are you going to motivate a student when the student already knows? If you're going to be transparent, say, yeah, I'm going to use AI to mark that. What message does that send to the student who may have paid a lot of money to be sitting there in front of you? They may have traveled across the world to be sitting in front of you. And they say, what's the point? You don't care enough to mark it. Why should I care enough to do it? And this has just been going around my head now for months, and I'm getting such interesting conversations with people right across the education system here in the UK. And there was a survey that came out, Centre for Democracy and Technology in the US just last year. Again, apologies, it's schools data, but it's the only one I found so far as a survey that actually looked at this. So they wanted to find out whether AI affects the relationship between the students and their teachers. And in response to the statement, using AI in class makes me feel as though I'm less connected to my teacher, 50% of the students said, yeah, it does make me feel less connected. And that rose to 56% when their school was recorded as using AI a lot of the time. You know, you guys have got, just like we have in the UK, massive problems with school absenteeism, students not turning up after the pandemic. These are hugely significant questions that go way beyond just AI. But I can't see this going well if we then throw into the situation, oh yeah, we're also not going to pay attention to the work that you do. That to me feels like something might break. So if we go right back to the science of learning, and about learning happens when we think hard. The sweet spot, according to the science of learning, is educator thinks really hard about designing high quality teaching and learning. The student then thinks hard about completing the work they have been set, and then the educator thinks hard about marking that piece of work. That's what the science of learning would say is the sweet spot. But what worries me is that we might be slipping. These are two extreme positions, but I'm worried that we might be slipping more towards the right-hand side here. The educator doesn't have to think as hard anymore about planning a lesson. They might choose to, but they don't have to think as hard anymore. The student, I mean, we'll go talking about the student cheating stuff, which is, driving a coach and horses through the whole, UK university system at the moment. Students doesn't think about their assignments anymore. And then the educator, then even if the assignment does come in, which was written by AI, the educator then gets AI to mark it anyway. And it's AI talking to AI. The science of learning says that down that right-hand side, no learning is taking place at all. And that really does send a chill down my spine, because I don't think we're too far away from that in some situations now. So my paper didn't end with the cheeriest conclusion, but I thought, based on what I found, I am very, very concerned. And I've said that to many people publicly. Now, my paper's out in the public domain. I've not stopped saying the same thing since. I am very worried about the direction of travel, because we have set up a situation through no one's planning beforehand. We've ended up in a situation where there is a genuine risk that nobody is really doing much thinking anymore. And that means that no learning is taking place. And what the research evidence, as I've just told you through some of the studies, the youngest and lowest attaining pupils are the most vulnerable to what's happening. And they don't know it. And it's possible that their teachers and educators and lecturers don't know it either. But that's what the research evidence is already showing. And I suspect that's going to continue now. Because ultimately, when it comes to being presented with these generative AI tools like ChatGPT, there's a very clear choice between developing that knowledge and expertise by thinking hard or taking the shortcut. If I was a student right now at university, I'm not going to lie, I would be seriously tempted to get ChatGPT to write my essay for me in 5 minutes. I mean, I'm not stupid enough to think that I would somehow be immune from this, because I wouldn't be. But I've got, 20 plus years of experience behind me now. So when I use it, it's very different from a novice using it. And that, I think, is something we just haven't bottomed out yet at all. Right, that's a cheery bit of my presentation done. Right, let's move on to some of the solutions, because I don't want to leave you all doom and gloom, because there are, I think, some ways through this. Uncomfortable sometimes, but there are some ways through this. Just after ChatGPT was launched, literally a few months after that, I published a big report over in the UK called Examining Exams. There'd been a real confluence of things happening in the UK at that time. We'd had 10 years or so in the school system in the UK where basically everything that wasn't a written exam had pretty much been thrown out, because the government at the time said, we just don't trust it anymore. There's too much cheating. We're just going to go back to written exams. And they did. For almost every subject they possibly could, they went back to written exams at age 11, 16 and 18, right across the system. Universities could still do what they want, but in the school system, a very decisive shift towards written exams. Then we had the pandemic, which has destroyed our exam system. It didn't exist for a couple of years at all. And then on top of that, ChatGPT then turned up as we were recovering from the pandemic. And so I did this study with my fantastic co-author, Eleanor, because we really wanted to ask, look, we know written exams are not perfect. Not even the strongest supporter of written exams in the world would say they're perfect, but they do have an important role. In a world of ChatGPT, is there anything else we can get? Do we have to go for the supervised big lecture hall, everyone sitting in silence written exam? Is there anything else we can go to? And we looked at a whole range of different assessment methods. And we looked at coursework controlled assessment, which is, I don't know if you use it much in the US, bit of a hybrid model of where you do supervised work, but it's sort of essays in supervised conditions. We sort of tried it. It hasn't quite worked very well in UK schools. We looked at what happened in the pandemic, massive grade inflation in UK schools and universities. We looked at portfolios, so art and design portfolio. We looked at extended essays and projects, oral assessments like Vivas and language exams, and performance-based assessments like music, for example. We didn't just look at the evidence from the UK, we looked at the evidence from US schools as well. And we didn't just look at schools, we looked at universities, and we looked at professional training, because of course it's very easy to forget that professions like law and medicine, they're doing assessments all the time, and we've done research on those. What did we learn about those other tools? And we brought all this together and we came to some conclusions, which I thought I'd share some of them today. It's a massive 25,000 word report. I can't do it justice today, but I thought on the topic of AI, there are some things that are worth thinking about. Unsurprisingly, we came to the conclusion that sometimes you just can't use a written exam. When it comes to a musical performance, no one wants us to judge a musician on their ability to pass a written exam. There are absolutely some situations, even with ChatGPT around, where we have to use something that's more authentic. And I think that's just a simple but important thing to say. But what we found, unquestionably, was that the research evidence shows, particularly based on our experience in the UK, but also the US has grappled with this too, that there are so many alternatives like essays, the classic take-home essay, which was already looking pretty unreliable before the pandemic and ChatGPT came along. But they're verging on worthless in some situations. And I know that's really uncomfortable to say that, because I have, during my undergraduate, my postgraduate degree, the productive struggle. You give me a pile of research papers, I read through them, I figure out what the patterns are, and I try and build an argument, and then I try and put it together in a 5,000 word essay, and I do all that stuff. In the world we live in now, there is a serious question mark about whether that's really worth it as an assessment method, particularly in a high stakes context. And I know that, like I say, that is a pretty uncomfortable thing to say, but that's just a conclusion that we came to based purely on the research evidence and what it was telling us. There is also the problem of teacher bias. When teachers mark their students' work, we've got good evidence in the UK that bias creeps in unconsciously, but it does, particularly for low income and special educational needs students. Anonymous written exams get around that, of course. There are some alternatives to written exams which are great, but they're very expensive to do. Medical exams, when we train doctors, it's really expensive to do the brilliant assessment they do because you need so many people to do it. There's a good study we found about art projects, judging those, that you need something like 5 or 6 different assessors to actually produce a reliable judgment on one single piece of artwork, which is fine. But who's going to pay for that? Certainly not in the school system, maybe at university level, but it's not going to work for schools. It's not practical. So it's great, but it's not practical at scale. And ultimately, we conclude the UK government was right to scrap almost all forms of what we call non-exam assessment. We didn't just have, even before ChatGPT came along, we didn't just have students cheating. We had parents doing their work for their kids. We had teachers giving their students a little nod and a wink saying, quickly sort of change that paragraph and then that will get you the extra mark for that. It was pervasive. We couldn't stop it. And because of that, we conclude the UK government was right to basically get rid of that stuff. Even though we know they lose skill development in that process of getting rid of it, we felt it was the only way to go. Oral exams, though, came out really well. We've had them obviously for languages since the dawn of time. Vivas, we looked at research evidence on Vivas, which funnily enough, despite being a really rigorous and revered type of assessment, are terrible from a reliability perspective. You've got every university making up its own mind about how many people need in the room, who gets to ask questions, how many questions are going to be, how long is it going to last, what kind of topics are we going to talk about. Some research showing that actually most examiners just have decided whether someone's going to pass or not before they walk into the room. Absolute disaster from a consistency perspective, but still a very rigorous form of assessment. And so the conclusion that we came to was that actually, again, I know it's not a great message, but supervised exams in a high stakes context particularly are the only way to go now, because we need to get students to think hard. These written exams, maybe they're digital equivalents too, so we don't have to just exclusively written exams, but sort of knowledge-focused written tests and supervised oral exams, which we think are probably underused, if anything else. We think now that combination of supervised written and supervised oral exams is probably the best way we can now move forward, even though some things will have to be lost along the way. But I've seen loads of stuff from the US telling me that you guys are already thinking about these sorts of things. So an article from Business Insider, college professors going back to paper exams and handwritten essays. The bottom left, University of Wisconsin, more professors now starting to use pen and paper exams to combat artificial intelligence cheating. On the right-hand side, just a few weeks ago in the Washington Post, professors turning back to oral exams in the world of ChatGPT. Down at the bottom right from Inside Higher Ed, again, switching back to handwriting to try and deal with this situation. I think that is very sensible. And that's what the research that I've done on AI and on exams shows, that this is probably the way forward. And I know it feels a bit traditional, bit historical. Really, have we not moved? Are we still doing what we did 100 years ago? There was a reason why, doing supervised exams works, because we can stop cheating. Cheating is not new. Cheating is in no way new, as you guys know, but the scale of it and the fact that everyone can do it at zero cost now is almost an insurmountable challenge. We have to push back. So I'm going to finish my presentation today exactly where I started, which is with the London Black Cab. Given what I told you about the knowledge and how difficult it is, surely the question is, why bother? Why not just be an Uber driver? I mean, as from what I can tell, to be an Uber driver, you need sort of 3 things. You need a driving license, a car, and a pulse. And that's basically all you need to be an Uber driver, right? Like, why would you spend 3 years of your life? Lots of people have to stop working full time, even drop out of work completely, just to pass the knowledge test to be a London Black Cab driver. Why do that? And the answer to why bother came in the year 2000 from a study by a lady called Eleanor Maguire, years and years ago now. based at University College London, did a brain scanning study where she scanned the brains of taxi drivers, and she also scanned the brains of other people who weren't taxi drivers but were similar sort of age and educational level. And what she found was quite remarkable. What she was interested in was looking at the hippocampus. So those of you who love your psychology, you'll know the hippocampus buried deep down in the brain in both the hemispheres, hippocampi, I should say, probably in plural, absolutely essential for the human memory system and also for spatial planning, right? We know that. And what she found in these brain scans was that that part of the brain, certainly the posterior part, so the reverse part of that brain, actually got bigger. Their brain, the brain memory circuits for learning got bigger in the taxi drivers compared to non-taxi drivers. That part of their brain literally grew in response to how hard they were learning. And they found that the longer they'd been a taxi driver, the bigger the effect was. And that's not only an amazing example of sort of neuroplasticity, the fact that our brain can change, but it just shows that when you think hard about something, your brain responds to that. And that is something we just cannot lose sight of. So in a world of Uber and ChatGPT and Google Maps and everything else, we are now in a situation where we can reduce the cognitive demands of a phenomenal range of tasks that we have never been able to do before. Even search engines helped us reduce the demands a bit. But the things that you can now do with this technology is absolutely incredible from a technological perspective. We can reduce the demands of all these tasks. The question is, should we? Written exams and oral exams force people to think hard. There is no escape. The knowledge test for taxi drivers in London, there is no escape. You have to think hard or you will not succeed. And that really simple message, memory is the residue of thought. Learning happens when we think hard. That is the message. We are going to have to grapple with this across all sorts of professions, not just at university, the way we train teachers and doctors and lawyers. We're going to have to probably rethink all of this now, because if you are not making someone think hard, there is a good chance it's not worth doing now at all as an assessment and as a form of learning. And I know that can feel a bit bleak, and I know that can be quite a troubling message, but that is the inescapable conclusion that I've reached from my research. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to pass back to Jamie. I would love to hear what you guys have been experiencing and seeing, and whether you agree or disagree with my conclusions. But to me, we've just got to think about making sure that we know that people are thinking hard. Not we're hoping they're thinking hard. We need to know. Jamie, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was amazing. And I was thrilled the whole time, even though a little dismayed and disheartened with the less cheery bits.
A mix of emotions there. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, it's quite all right. And we've had a really good chat going on here. So what I would love to have happen is if people have a question that they would like addressed to Tom, please feel free to repost it in the chat so that we can address those questions. We have a good amount of time left for questions today, which is very exciting, so that we can have a dialogue rather than just a presentation today. So, and also you've been getting a lot of kudos for this being a really engaging and good presentation.
Thank you. That's very kind of me. Yeah.
All right. So let's see if anybody wants to come off mute, you can raise your hands, or let's go through the chat here.
Yeah, some great questions I've seen here already.
It's really busy.
It is. I'm still scrolling. I'm not to the bottom yet.
All right, so I'm going to go to one that says specifically from Carol. It's a question for Tom. I think the question is, for which tasks should the cognitive demands be reduced, and for which ones should they not be reduced?
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be enormous variation between different subjects. So it is probably quite hard to come up with any kind of rule for what we should do. I think the challenge is to make sure that I think variety is good. So I know at university level, we talk about group work, we talk about project work, we talk about team building. You know, we cannot lose those things, right? That is an essential part of the learning experience, is to learn with other people. I do not want people to be sitting there in front of their desk revising for written exams and doing nothing else. That would be an awful situation. I probably should have emphasized it a bit more. The research that I did was based on high stakes assessments. So really looking at those really important, like end of year, end of course assessments, where we just have to know how much a student really knows and understands. There will be lots of situations in a run up to that where I'd be looking to bring in much more variety. And I'd be looking to really just explore students' understanding of how they can work together. Even with group work now, we've got a big problem of, even if you sort of in a groups, everyone gets given different tasks and they bring them all back together again. We still don't know whether students are going to be doing that work anymore. And so we can't rely on it for that final judgment. But I would definitely not want all other low stakes assessments to disappear, because we need to give the students the experience of learning in those different contexts to prepare them for future life and work. So in terms of which tasks, I would definitely reserve those supervised exams for the high stakes assessments. I wouldn't want much else creeping in there. For other things, a blend is a good way to go, I think.
Great. And then from Rachel, we have about your thoughts on the return of written exams. I'm still worried that shifting back to this only in-person written exams will bring us back to the 90s for language-based learning disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, etc. That widespread computer use has lessened the impact significantly.
Yeah, I think I scrolled past, I think someone else making a really interesting point about the fact that actually we know that written exams for some students are very challenging, and they whereas for other students they really won't be. I think that's why I mentioned that as the most important thing is about the supervised element of it. So that's why I said that the digital equivalent to written exam, for example, as long as that's a supervised test where we know which human being is doing the test, I think we should feel relatively comfortable with that. It's just my concern is that unless, and I know it feels a little bit dystopian, but unless someone's watching over your shoulder, we can't be sure. But I think that really is the problem that we've got right now. We really can't be sure. And particularly when it comes to high stakes assessments, we cannot not be sure who is doing that assessment, because it will be applying for jobs. It will be applying for a doctorate place, some very scarce opportunities. We do need to know at that point. As long as it's supervised, I think that is probably the more important element of it, rather than it has to be a pen and paper and it has to be handwritten and it has to be on this type of paper, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, it's about that, making sure that final grade that we can trust it, and that supervised element is the most important part of that. I think there is probably an increasing case for using digital exams in lots of situations. The UK government, as you may not have seen, for schools again only, but for schools they are now looking at bringing in option in a few years' time of doing either a digital version or a paper-based version of the same qualification, so that students might be able to choose. It's very early days, but that it seems sensible as long as it's still a rigorously conducted assessment. I think we can be confident in that. But yeah, great question.
And to kind of piggyback off of that, I'm going to skip one question in the chat and jump down one, because I think it applies directly to your response here. And this is from Kate saying, what can we do as online teachers? I am doing oral evals, flipped presentations, scaffolded writing. This doing that supervised exam assessment, etc. It gets more challenging for individuals who signed up for completely asynchronous courses. So any thoughts on that?
No, it's a brilliant question. And it is something that, again, is probably less of an issue in the world of school-based education, but becomes a big issue when you're talking about international forms of education like universities offer. Again, we do the best that we can. We saw during the pandemic, obviously, a huge shift towards online learning. But what we're now seeing is not just universities sort of starting to get a bit uncomfortable about that, but we've seen lots of employers getting really uncomfortable about this. I don't know if you've seen some of the amazing headlines of even tech companies, ironically enough, tech companies having to give up on online interviews because people are just cheating during online interviews now. They have their two screens set up. They've got the AI listening to what someone's saying over the question they're being asked. The AI then pumps out a response. Student reads out there. I mean, it's just mind-blowing, the stuff that's happening right now. You do the best that you can. The supervised nature of an online oral exam, face-to-face conversation, that can still work over Zoom. I do genuinely think that we can. I mean, I know some people expect you to have sort of a 360 camera to make sure there's nobody else in the room. We can't stop cheating. We definitely shouldn't aim for perfection. I think that would be the wrong thing to try and say we need to 100% stamp out cheating. We hadn't stamped out cheating before ChatGPT came along. We hadn't stamped out cheating before the pandemic. So it'd be unrealistic to say that's the goal. But if we're doing written exams, I've seen some amazing list of criteria of for online courses of all the things, all the safeguards they put in place with the cameras. You have to do a sweep of the room, and you have to then have checks where you can, your screen is then locked and everything. Yeah, I mean, obviously it can get very complicated very quickly. That's why I think oral exams, I think, could play a greater role, and to take some of the strain of trying to supervise exams, written exams across the world or across the country, which is just very, very difficult. So again, that balance will look different every time. But I think if we start with written and oral exams, which are supervised as much as we can do in the concepts we're working in, I think oral exams, like I say, are massively underused when we're trying to explore whether students really know and understand what they're talking about. And it is hard, but not impossible to cheat in those. So I'd say maybe more of a focus on those might help.
Thanks. I appreciate that. That's particularly important for us to see it. I don't know if anybody else saw this information. I sent it to Tom earlier this week about a new tool called Einstein
Oh,
that,
Einstein.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Do you want to
unbelievable.
describe it?
Oh man, how can I describe it? It's a tool whereby an AI agentic bot. So this is the next wave we're probably going to see, where it's not just a chat bot; it can do things for you. So this bot can log into your VLE as a student. It can watch your lectures for you. It can read the notes from your lectures for you. It can then write the essay that accompanies the lecture for you, and you can just sleep the whole time. You can literally be
And
asleep, and it would do all of the stuff for you.
yeah, it uses your login and password and acts as you.
Just
It's just
unbelievable.
overwhelming, right, as we think
It
about it.
is, for educators, this is overwhelming. I mean, this is to try and get our heads around what we're, and to think, this is just happening, accelerating this technology now, and it's going to get better at what it does, which is why, again, I think there is this horrible question mark over these unsupervised bits of work now, which, for so many of us, people on this call have gained so much from this productive struggle with that pile of research papers, thinking really hard, what is my argument going to be? What are going to be the counter arguments? How am I going to phrase this? How many paragraphs do I need to make that point? What does my conclusion say? I don't know how we use that anymore. I really don't. Whether we go for some hybrid models, which again, like I said, we've tried in UK schools, but without much success, of sort of doing supervised extended assessments where you can maybe get someone locked in a room for a day and get them to write an essay. I think we may need to start thinking a bit more about these sorts of things. Give them a day to write something rather than saying, oh, just hand it in 2 weeks' time, and then supervise them during that day. Again, online courses become tricky in that context. But I think some of these hybrid models might be worth exploring. Again, they have resource implications. I know some people are very cleverly set up where one person can sort of monitor lots of different online students at the same time, might be able to piggyback off that kind of technology. But yeah, I think the pure model of just saying to students, yeah, let me know how it goes in a couple of weeks from now, and I'll accept whatever you hand in. I don't see what value it has anymore, which is very sad from an education perspective, but I'm struggling to get enthusiastic about it in this day and age.
Thanks, Tom. All right, we have another question from Kafuli. Please forgive me if I mispronounced your name. Any recommendations on how nursing schools can combat the increasing use of AI? Nurses need to know and know in the moment, but our students are using AI more for assignments, especially for writing papers. And in the US, nurses, in order to get their board certification and be able to work on the floors, they have to pass very specific, very challenging exams. And so what can end up happening is these students progress through the courses and yet then aren't able to pass those exams, which then that fail rate has implications for the schools then as well, for future funding, et cetera. So it's a big question.
So my wife is an accountant, and we have a similar kind of structure for accountancy exams in the UK. So after you finish your undergraduate degree, you then have to go and do normally sort of 2 or 3 years worth of exams after you finish your degree to get that accountancy qualification. And there's a lot of people failing those exams. And what my wife is finding now is that more and more people are coming out of university having done no work at all for 3 or 4 years, and then they're coming up against these really challenging exams and going, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to take on this challenge anymore, because I mean, even at school, maybe they didn't have it. It is something in English schools that, although there are lots of downsides to it, because we have such a focus on written exams, supervised national written exams, that students at least get an experience, at age 16, 18, of what these things are. At university, that can slip backwards, but I think it's the same problem again. If you just aren't seeing those nursing students produce that piece of work, how valuable is it for you as an educator in terms of gauging what that individual has now learned? And I think a lot of professions now are going to have to start thinking really hard about whether they place much emphasis on these written assignments. To be a teacher, so my teacher training course, like well over 20 years ago now, because it was a postgraduate course, technically, to be a teacher, I had to submit, I think it was a total of sort of 15,000 words of written assignments to get my certification. I'd look at that now and say, I don't think that's really worth anything. I have no idea what those teaching students are doing. They're using ChatGPT to plan their lessons, even though they don't have the expertise, which is really scaring me and a lot of other people too. I just have to focus on being absolutely sure that that student has learned something. And the supervised written and oral exams, I mean, obviously use lots of oral exams in nursing and medicine as well. Like I say, I just think maybe we just need to just stop using those written assignments, even if it means we then use that time we save to do more supervised assignments instead. I'd see that as a good trade-off. So the student spends less time writing those unsupervised assignments and more time preparing for maybe an extra oral exam or an extra written exam. They are obviously designed to be tough, like you say, Jamie. I mean, they're not. We don't want people coming through that who aren't ready to go. But I just think these unsupervised bits of work, I think a lot of professions are going to need to look at themselves in the mirror and say, if we don't know whether the student produced that work, are we comfortable letting them into that profession on the basis of the grades they got for that piece of work, when somebody else who didn't cheat might then be disadvantaged in that context, which again is a horrible incentive. But I think we just need to be really quite open with ourselves across lots of different professions, whether we really can trust what's been submitted to us. And I think in most cases, the answer will probably be no. So yeah, it's those students will be using it all the time for AI. I would be for their assignment. I'd be amazed, absolutely amazed if they weren't, because it's really tough. Like you say, Jamie, they're really tired. They're working long hours, even when they're training. The idea of either pressing a button and getting an essay in 30 seconds from now, or spending the rest of my evening doing that when I could be asleep, or seeing my family, or having food. These are rational choices that people are making. I don't blame them at all. They're just making rational choices, and the rational choices use AI to do it instead. Uncomfortable as that may be.
Ooh, that one left the mark.
I don't like it. I don't like where we've ended up. I'm not giving you the world as I want it to be, Jamie.
Well, we'll give you time at the end to just maybe put a nice little bow on something. But we do have a question from Joe that asks, in what ways do you think we should incorporate AI in our lessons, considering SUNY includes using AI in the informational literacy learning outcome?
I mean, this is just such a difficult question. Lots and lots of people saying US and UK and beyond, we have to teach students how to use this stuff because they're going to use it in the workplace. And I guess my response to that is, firstly, that I don't think we know what the workplace is going to look like in 12 months from now, let alone in 5 years from now. And I think, like I say, the UK government's saying that schools should be teaching kids how to be more literate with AI. And I'm going, this technology is always and has always moved faster than a curriculum ever can. So in that respect, nothing really has changed. We've got to make sure as educators that we get that knowledge and understanding into those students and the behaviors, where we need them as best we can. So, man, yeah, I think there is a case for maybe doing some sort of foundational work around AI literacy, in terms of just letting people know what these tools do, how they operate, what their strengths and weaknesses are. I think that makes sense, because that is probably going to stand the test of time now. Even if we move to agentic chatbots, as seems to be the next wave of things coming, it's still going to be based on the same underlying technology. So teaching people about the technology, I think, is very powerful. I think teaching people to use ChatGPT, I'd probably be less comfortable with, because that technology in 12 months' time could have been thrown out the window. And I think that's where I'd probably sort of draw it's a bit of a hazy line, I know, but I think that's where the AI literacy, there's a difference between it being a genuinely good use of people's time and maybe a less good use of people's time. That's probably the distinction that I would draw. Sorry, I know it is a really tricky one, because there's so much pressure to get people ready for jobs and get people workplace ready, but on the basis that employers don't know what to do with AI right now. I don't think we should necessarily be spending too much time as educators trying to keep up, because to design a really high quality curriculum, I mean, that's a very, very significant effort to do that, and it'll be out of date. Probably since the time I started this talk, there's probably something else has been launched. I'm going to come across on my social media feed, and I go, oh man, Einstein Mark II is already out. And I'm going, oh, I thought that was last week's news. No, it's happening. I think that is indicative of the speed. Focus on the foundational properties of what this technology is and can do. And then I think employers have to step in here and say, well, actually, to work here and in this profession or in this firm, this is the technology that we use, and then train people up, maybe an apprenticeship model or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I think the foundational stuff is where the focus should be, I think, within the education system.
And I might add to that point, which I think they're all great points that you've made, that we need to include an education about what its impact is on the individual's learning, like what you were talking about earlier today. Part of AI literacy is understanding how much you're offloading to that and how little you're gaining from it, intellectually speaking. So to kind of carry on with this thread, we have David, who has said, any thoughts on this ubiquitous term AI literacy? It's been monetized by orgs already, preying on the fear of educators and institutions.
Yeah, I mean, when I read stories about US states signing deals with OpenAI to convert all their schools into do this, or Elon Musk signing a deal with an entire country, was it something like Ecuador, where he said, oh yeah, we're just going to do chatbot. That stuff makes me really nervous. When the companies who have the profit incentive turn up and say, hey, I've got this great product, please come and use this, it'll be really helpful, I am increasingly skeptical they have the best interests of students and educators at heart. There are some really good people out there right across the world, from what I can see, who are trying to make sense of this for educators and students, and genuinely trying to help them navigate their way through this stuff. And that's where AI literacy, again, if it focuses on what the technology is, what it can do, how it can work, what we should be wary of, situations we should use it, shouldn't use it, what it means for the individuals concerned. That's where I think AI literacy can help. Does people understand what we are talking about? I just get very nervous when a company says, oh, here's our tool which you should use, and it will teach you how to be AI literate, and it will help you use our products better. And I go, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to rely on Google to give me an honest and objective view of whether their software is the right way for students to go. But AI, like I say, AI literacy does have value potentially, but the AI products making an appearance in that gets me very nervous. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. All right, so we have a question from Christina. And by the way, we still have like 37 new questions coming in, so we'll be here a while if that's okay.
We're trying to keep up with the chat. That's fine. It's fine.
It's crazy. But this is good. This is
good. I'm pleased.
Yeah,
I'm pleased.
Yeah. It's really engaging. So Christina asks, what do you think about pivoting from using exams to more project-based, skills-applied learning in conjunction with AI?
Great question. The examining exams report that I mentioned, we recommended a big focus on written exams. It should stay. We recommended that oral exams should play a greater role. But we also talked about something we have in our school system called an extended project qualification, where a student can pick any topic they want, and for about a year of their towards the end of their secondary education, their high school, they can either write an essay on their topic, they can create a product, they can create an artifact, they can make a piece of music, they can literally choose anything they want to do because they've got to create something. But what we're seeing now is just rampant cheating in terms of like if students choose to write an essay, then they're getting AI to write the essay for them. They're getting AI to write the production log they have to produce alongside whatever they're creating, which was supposed to be a kind of a safeguard against people cheating, but they're now getting AI to write that for. It's really descending into a bit of a ridiculous situation. But we actually said that we should keep that in our system, but we should have it as an ungraded piece of work. And the reason we ended up there, a lot of people said, oh, but if it's not graded, students won't care. And that is an interesting, dynamic to explore. But it really does depend on how you present it. If you present it as, this is our part of the course where we're going to teach you this particular skill, and the way that we're going to do that is through these experiences, going back to what I was saying earlier, where we're going to put you in these teams, we're going to get you to do this. then if students use a bit of AI to help them in that environment, that's not necessarily a problem because you've been really clear what the skill is that you actually want to develop, and you've told students, and if and they can then use that as much. You can set whatever boundaries you want. It's going to be very hard to stop them using AI, but at least you've been clear up front what that skill is. Your team building being a classic example. We want to learn this skill. We're going to now do a project where you have to work together in a team over this many weeks. We're going to give you this much support, et cetera, et cetera. So you can still develop those skills if you pitch it in the right way. I would question whether grading that work is now particularly useful. Peer assessment, of course, is something we haven't talked much about today, but I do think in group settings, that is something that even with ChatGPT around, you might not be able to get students to judge the quality of each other's written contributions because ChatGPT could have written that, but you can certainly judge people on the people skills that we know are going to become increasingly important in an AI world. I used to do a lot of peer assessment when I was teaching high school students, and it was very different for them. But I actually I found that they really took to it when you bring them into the process at the very beginning. You say, here's a skill. How do you think we should assess it? And you spend the whole first session just talking about what they think would be valid ways to sort of assess it, what skills they think you can pick out fairly. They get really engaged in the process as well. And once I've then brought them into the process, then I can set them loose and I can build some skills in a different way. And so again, in that low stakes environment where I'm doing ongoing work, ongoing monitoring, trying to develop those skills over time, I do think there is still a space for these really powerful interventions that we just don't want to lose them. These experiences that will help set them up for life and work later on. So that's kind of where I've landed on this. I think there are some assessments which you don't have to grade yourself, but maybe students grading each other, having already decided what they're going to be measuring and what they think is fair to measure. I think you can still do that stuff. And I think that's a great lesson for those students to understand the importance of interacting with people in the right way and learning those extra skills that they wouldn't learn sitting at a desk by themselves. So yeah, I think there is a space for it.
Thanks. And that ties kind of tightly with what Scott mentions here, where he's saying, I'm worried that the pendulum will swing back to summative high stakes exams rather than scaffolded formative assessments. Work we've moved the needle on significantly over the last 2 decades now may be threatened or undone. So I think that you're suggesting a combination of those kind of high stakes exams that have had the opportunities for that formative assessment in order to get there, so that students can engage in that Vygotsky level of learning that you're talking about there.
Yeah, as long as you're making sure that students are thinking hard, you're in a good place. And I think when it comes to group work and peer assessment, you can design that in a way where students are still thinking hard, and you should definitely set that as a goal and definitely work towards that. And students can be part of that journey too. I do think the teaching students how to use AI does get quite problematic in that context, because I just don't know if students are thinking hard anymore. So like I say, it's just that sort of litmus test of, have I designed something in which students are having to think hard? That can be interpersonal skills as much as it can be a written 2-hour exam. I'm still finding different ways to get them to think hard. But the point being that you have to be absolutely sure they are thinking hard, not hoping they are thinking hard, which is where I think a lot of us have just got stuck at the moment, because we put a lot of the tools we did use not that long ago, they are now just a bit of a hope that students think. You give them a take-home essay, we're hoping they're thinking hard, but we don't know. As long as you've got that confidence that you can really, really see it, and 99% of your students, you can be 99% sure are thinking hard, okay, you're in a good place. But that is the test. Not, is it written, is it digital, is it an oral exam? Are you absolutely sure that you've put students in a situation where they're having to think hard? That's when learning happens.
Yeah, as uncomfortable as that is for some students to experience that, I don't know this, I don't understand it, and to push past that into the curiosity to figure out how to actually form that new learning. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No. I think that's absolutely right. It's the students, that our brains are hardwired to take shortcuts. Please do not think that anything I've said about students or educators today is a criticism of them. It is our brains are desired to do the cognitive offloading, because it's just easier, and it means we consume less of our mental resources. That's what our brain likes to do, right? It is designed to save resources. It's designed to save physical resources. It's designed to save mental resources. So when you say to students, I'm going to give you a challenge now, that is always going to get a reaction from some. Or it always has, and it always will. But
Yeah.
again, if you get students to buy into that early on and explain why and how it's going to be better for them, I think you will get some positive reaction from that. I think dumping it on people and just saying to people, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're doing a 2-hour written exam next week." I mean, like, whoa, okay, yeah. I mean, that's a lot for someone to switch to. But if you talk about going back to that sort of the peer assessment or the formative assessment, when you say to people, "This is what we're trying to do. These are the skills we're trying to build. This is the knowledge we're trying to build. This is the understanding, and we're going to give you different opportunities to show what you can do." I think people will buy that, but that requires a very deliberate movement towards that way of thinking. And because this stuff has happened so fast, I think everybody has been caught out. Absolutely everybody, from the school, elementary school teachers through to postgraduate supervisors. Everybody has been caught out. But we have got a chance now to just reset and think. I've just got to make sure they're thinking hard. What options do I have? And let's build the students into that process.
Love that. Love that. I always say that our brains are energy misers, so I
totally
resonate with that.
They're very good at it.
Yeah. That's what they're designed to. All right. So Alicia says, it would be interesting to see if the data shows that students who use AI to replace their own work simply cannot get a job or keep a job because they don't actually know the information.
Oh, wow. This is like, okay, so shameless plug for my podcast. I'm terribly sorry, but just a couple of episodes ago, I've heard you guys are having trouble with this as well in the US. Did an episode called "Why Can't Graduates Get Jobs at the Moment?" And I spoke to two absolute experts on this topic. I heard that graduate level unemployment is really high in the US at the moment. And thinking about how employers are having to deal with this stuff is really, really interesting. So what we've seen in the UK is employers using AI. We're not really convinced. A lot of them say they're using AI for doing their recruitment, but we're not actually that convinced they are really using it. They might be saying that, but we don't think too much. They've always used technology for years, but we don't think there's much AI in there yet. But what we're seeing is that university students are using AI to apply for more jobs than they've ever applied for before, because in 10 seconds they can write a resume and a covering letter. That's never been possible before at that speed. And that we could literally see in the data that they're submitting more job applications than they've ever submitted before. But for an employer, that's a nightmare, because what they've now got is this sea of identical resumes and covering letters coming their way. And they don't know what to do. And we're seeing some really interesting responses from some employers, not just switching back to in-person testing, which they absolutely are, some of the big employers. Some employers have been doing video interviews since the pandemic. People are cheating in video interviews now as well, so they're having to scrap that too. And they're going back to what are some quite traditional methods, because particularly for a small business, a big global multinational firm will be able to find a way through this. They'll be able to do some filtering and get down to the candidates they want. But if you're a small business and you put a job advert out and you get 100 identical applications, I mean, what do you do? I was running a small business myself for the last 5 or 6 years. I have absolutely no idea what I would do. You don't have the time as a small business to go and speak to every single candidate. You just have to take a punt. I've heard some amazing anecdotes of employers who think they've got the best candidates from the job applications they received, and the students not only were totally unsuited to the job. One employer was telling me they're not even sure the candidates know what job they've applied for, because they've just applied for so many, because they can do it so fast now. This whole landscape now is just shifting underneath people's feet, and employers do not know what to do yet either. If students can produce applications faster, but the student who, there's a great study done recently showing that lower performing students are now beating higher performing students to the most prestigious jobs, because they're able to mask their low performance by getting ChatGPT to write their application and write their resume in a way that in the past it would have had spelling mistakes in there. It wouldn't have been ordered very sensibly. It's causing chaos, and nobody has got that solution yet to what we do about it. I suspect in-person testing is going to have a massive renaissance now, because employers just do not know who was on the other end of that resume or that covering letter. They have no idea. They've got to find that out to make sure they recruit the right people, or they're just going to start recruiting people and then firing them. That's a disaster. That's so expensive. That's such a problem. So we're now seeing this next phase of what are employers trying to do, and they're making things up as they're going along, and they're very honest about that. No one has an answer to this right now. But in-person testing, yeah. If you've got shares in an in-person testing company, you're probably sitting there pretty smug right now, because you go, yeah, these testing centers, it's going to come back. We got rid of it during the pandemic. It's going to come back with a vengeance, I suspect.
Yeah, I would think so too. So I'm aware of the time. We have about 1 minute left, and before,
Okay.
well, actually more than that. I'm sorry. It's 1:20, not 1:15, our time. But do you want to kind of do some sort of summation, leave us with maybe a little bit of hope,
Well,
or
I mean,
not?
it's it's going to undoubtedly require change, and we never know whether change is definitely going to work out for the better or worse. But this is going to require just a change in what we're employers are going to have to change, universities are going to have to change, schools. Everybody is trying to find their feet, and I think that's what's quite unnerving about this is we haven't got that. Oh, but just do this instead, and it will be fine. Because it's going to, that comment we just had about I don't really want to go back to where we were 20 years ago. I'm just an eternal pragmatist, and I'm sorry to be so boring about this, but I'm just a pragmatist about it. This is not the education system that I want that I've described to you today. It's the education system that I think we're going to have to move to, and it has big resource implications. I saw someone saying in the chat, how do I do oral exams of 500 students? These are absolutely the right questions, and they are very, very difficult questions. The reason we went to written exams in the first place, historically, was because oral exams were too expensive because you had to get so many rooms and so many assessors. Yeah, this is really difficult stuff. We can absolutely get through to a good place at the end of it, but it is going to look very different from what we have now. And I think losing, take 5,000 word essays, 10,000 word essays, I think there is going to be a tinge of sadness about some of this stuff, because we know some great ways of learning may be lost along the way. But I do think we can get to a good place where we can have that variety, have that breadth of experiences, have those really good assessments alongside that we can genuinely trust. And if it means we put a bit less time into things we can't trust and a bit more time into things we can, I think that's probably a reasonable trade, even though it's not the education system that I'd want. If you gave me a blank piece of paper and ChatGPT didn't exist, I'm a pragmatist. We can get to a good place, but it will mean change, and we just need to really just work with each other and support each other as we do this, so that we get to a place where actually we're still happy that students really are learning, and we're enjoying our jobs too, which I don't think we can get there.
Great. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for giving us your time and your perspectives today. I really appreciate it very much. I would encourage everybody to keep this conversation going in the Brightspace Connect space that we have available for people who registered before the 16th. So I imagine we can have some great conversations and share a lot of resources about how we are either using AI in our teaching, how we are coaching our students about AI, etc. So I'm joined by lots of people here in the chat. Thanking you
Yes,
for
thank you
your
so much, guys.
presentation and discussion. So again, kudos. Thank you. If I could stand up and it would make a difference, I'd give you like a standing ovation
There's
here.
got to be a
But thank you
reaction
so
button at the bottom somewhere, and some fireworks somewhere or something like that. I don't know. There's probably
Yeah,
something done with it.
they've turned it off. Oh, Donna, you have a question, or was that a mistake? Hi, Donna.
It was a mistake.
That happens.
That's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Thank you again for the invitation. Like I say, you've got my stuff online. Feel free to get in touch afterwards. But I hope it's useful stuff, even if it
Yeah.
just gets you thinking hard about it. And thank you, David Schwimmer, for the round of applause as well in the
Yeah, there you
chat.
go.
That's
Yeah.
very kind of you.
The GIFs or GIFs. Okay, the question is, do you say GIFs or GIFs?
GIFs, I think.
Yes. It's a big debate. Like
Oh, it is. It is. It is.
yeah.
As long as we think hard about it, we'll be okay. That's the only thing. And
I
good
love
luck to
that.
whoever
All
it
right.
was earlier on in the chat who said they're going to go and be a London taxi driver. I wish you all the best. But get ready for 3 years of tough learning. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think that was Jay, who
It was
probably
Jay.
would do just fine as a London taxi cab driver. Thanks
3 years of
again,
hard
Tom.
graft. You can do it. You can do it. I believe in you.
Thank you very much.